Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of my interview with my friend and colleague, Carolyn Kalos, who is a family law attorney, mediator, and parent coordinator in New York. Thanks for coming back, Carolyn.
Thanks for having me.
Well, and for those of you who have listened or who were here with us on Monday, you know that Carolyn is doing an awful lot of parent coordination work these days in New York. And that is something that is really seeming to happen quite a bit. The rise of PC has really been sort of on a trajectory through COVID. And we talked about some of the reasons behind that and a little bit about what parent coordination looks like. But I want to dive in a little deeper into some topics around parent coordination because I know that this is something that for many families is not well understood or is just not known about. And they don't know that this is an option. And in many ways, there are so many benefits to having a parent coordinator involved that actually I'd like to start there. You know, we sort of skipped over it a little bit. We talked about some of them, but, you know, as someone who does parent coordination, what do you see as the benefits to all involved? Families, parents, children, courts, attorneys. What are the benefits of parent coordination?
So I think first and foremost is trying to keep people out of the court system. So my focus has always been kids. I think, you know, I represented children for over 20 years in the family court system. And the reason I left is I just couldn't stand to see how difficult it was, you know, especially the high conflict custody cases. I couldn't stand to see what it was doing to kids to just be involved in the process. So to keep families out of court, first and foremost, is better for children and for parents. Aside from the cost, I mean, the cost of litigating cases is just astronomical, but just trying to keep families together, working through their problems outside of court, away from judges, away from lawyers, finding solutions to their own problems, decreasing the conflict in the families. I always say this, studies show it's not divorce that hurts children, it's the conflict. It's being around the conflict, it's watching the conflict. Kids do better when their parents can get along, can work together, can communicate, right? So parents learning how not to be spouses, how to be co-parents, how to co-parent effectively, how to just manage issues that come up in a timely manner before they get long and drawn out and just people get more entrenched in their ways, how to have somebody who can, you know, help them reach consensus, come to decisions so that problems don't fester and get worse and worse and worse. So nothing like this can happen in the court system. They're too bogged down. They're too busy. It takes too long to get before a judge. A judge does not have the ability to take the time to get to know your family, to get to know what's best for your family, what's best for your children. So that's a very long run on. Maybe I should take a breath.
No, it's actually, well, I think that's because there are so many benefits to parent coordination. And one of the things that I've always, you know, been attracted to parent coordination for clients, even when I was a litigator, because I think I was introduced to parent coordination, probably 20 years ago or so, was because so often for parents, it's the day-to-day, what I'm going to call mini disputes that they actually need help with, right? Because as they go back and forth in their negative patterns of communication, every little thing becomes a disagreement or a point of conflict. And you can't run to your attorney and litigate over the homework not getting done on, you know, Sunday nights, or you could, but, you know, cost effective wise, to run back to court every time you have a disagreement with your co-parent can be extremely expensive and not very practical, because by the time you're finally going to get a determination, it's probably months and months and months down the road. If you have a parent coordinator that you're working with, you're not only going to work on that issue, but you're actually working on the construct around it, the way that the two of you approach it, the way the two of you communicate about these issues, the way you dissect the problem, the way that you generate other options, all of that. And whether or not the homework is getting done on Sundays or whatever your issue might be, is something that you can work with your parent coordinator on in an expedited timeline, right? So the fact is, it's really almost like a boot camp for co-parenting. I mean, if I can coin that or use that phrase, it's a way to take the negative dynamics and try to shift them while also solving problems along the way. Would you agree with that?
Right. I mean, so the goal is to sort of get people to focus on their kids, right? To love their kids and put their kids' needs before their desire to, hate their spouse, punish their spouse, do the opposite of what their spouse wants them to do, right? So if you sort of stop and explain to them what their behavior or what their decision is doing to their child, hopefully seeing that will make them rethink what they're doing. And I think actually how I'm obsessed with your podcast. I listen all the time. I think I told you I've missed my subway stop more than once because I'm engrossed. So Christina McGee, I recommend her book to all my co-parents, but she said something about like hating your spouse is really like, choosing your spouse over your child, and no person in their right mind would ever choose their ex-spouse over their child consciously, but choosing to engage in that conflict and continue to engage in that conflict is doing that. It's not only choosing the spouse over the child, it's showing them what happens when you no longer agree with somebody or love somebody, which is not a great message to send your child, right? That's another thing. And, so by showing the parent in real time what this looks like and what this is doing, the hope is to break the pattern, right? And to get the parent focused on the child and on new ways of making decisions that don't involve, that focus on the child, not on old patterns in the relationship, anger from the relationship, or anything having to do with making a decision based on the other parent, on anything other than what's best for the child.
Right. I mean, so how often do you hear as a point of, I'll call it argument in a discussion with co-parents, well, that's just not fair. And they mean not fair to themselves. And how often do you have to turn that around to, well, who is it not fair to, you or your children? Is there fair when it comes to, I get the comment a lot. I actually posted something the other day about taking the high road with your co-parent. Your co-parent, levels a blow, and our first instinct is to level one back. But if you love your children and you want to put them first, you take the high road and you love your children more than you hate your ex, kind of what you were just talking about. And I got all kinds of responses from people saying, well, yeah, but that's not fair. He doesn't let me see the kids on Mother's Day, so why should I let him see the kids on Father's Day? And that's kind of what you're talking about here, right? It's not about what your co-parent did, it's what's best for your kids.
Right. And, everything you do, you're modeling for your children the way you want to show them what kind of person. It was another one of your podcasts. You want to show them what kind of person you want to aspire to be when they grow up. And, you're basically showing them that even though you and their parent are no longer married, you're still a family. You still want to show respect for the other parent. And I think even also importantly, show that the two of you communicate, because we all know kids are smart and they're going to start trying to manipulate you by, well, my other parent said this. And if the two of you are not on the same page, they're going to start getting over on both of you. Like, well, I get to watch 8 hours of screen time at this one's house, or this one lets me eat dessert before dinner at this one's house. And if the two of you are not communicating, then they're going to end up engaging in all sorts of manipulation that's just not good for them.
Right. I mean, you are the united front of parents when it comes to co-parenting your kids, or that would be the ideal. And there's so many different things that a parent coordinator can help with. And we've talked about a lot of those. But there are some things that a parent coordinator, it's just not that, it's not their role. It's not appropriate. So open our eyes a little bit to where a parent coordinator won't go.
So even many of my colleagues are mental health professionals, right? They're therapists or family therapists, but in the role of a PC, you are not a therapist, right? So they don't do therapy. So I've had to find myself saying to somebody, I think maybe you should speak with a consulting attorney, because even though in my brain, I know I could give them the legal information they need, it's not my role. So you have to be really careful to stay in your lane as a parenting coordinator. Parenting coordinators don't do supervised visitation. It's just a different role. So that it would be, farmed out for that. Don't do forensics or evaluations. I mean, there's so many different roles within the court system, and it would be ideal, obviously, if one person could meet every single need, but the constraints are different and the roles are different. So it's really important to just basically, stay in your lane and do just what your role is the parenting coordination and teaching parents how to better communicate and keep the focus on their kids and keep, trying to help them redefine their roles.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, the staying in everyone's lane, because we run into it also, and I've talked about it on other shows about as being an attorney mediator. As an attorney in a mediation where I'm the mediator, people know you're an attorney, so they will turn to you and say, well, what should I do about this? And we're, as in our attorney hat, when that's on, people are paying us for advice. So it's very natural for us to say, well, here's, here are the pros, here are the cons, and here's what I would advise you do. That's what an attorney does. It's not what a mediator does, and it's not what a parent coordinator does. Although a parent coordinator can layer in that information, like you were just talking about a minute ago, about studies show that it's actually the conflict between their parents that causes problems for children, not just the fact of a divorce. That's information that can be layered in because it's neutral. It's giving information to both parents, even if it may be directed at one, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And there is some overlap, and that's what's complicated, right? There's always overlap between what's information versus advice, what's, telling them what, the big picture things are that, are needed versus, you should go to a therapist because X, Y, or Z. I mean, it can be complicated. There are gray areas.
Yeah, I would imagine. And so there's that tightrope that all professionals walk, no matter what their role is. I mean, attorneys walk a tightrope as well. We all walk different tightropes. But I wonder, do you have instances where you have to be sort of blunt with a parent about something? Is that a part of the role as well? I always, as an attorney, called it the come to Jesus moment. Like, look, we've got to sit down and I'm just really going to lay the facts out here for you.
Yeah.
Is that something you do as a parent coordinator?
Yes. I mean, you have to at certain points. Like I've had a conversation where I've said, you cannot involve your child in this kind of an adult conversation. You cannot speak to your child about the other parent like that. You just can't do it. I think that's well within the purview of the parenting coordinator. And it was, it's hard when things come up and one parent says one thing and another parent says one thing, but when you're meeting the people together, which is what after the initial meeting is really important to do, because again, you need to teach them how to communicate with each other so you can say at some point, you don't need me anymore. But in one of my cases, something came up about asking a child to lie. That's what it was. And I said, you just can't do it. That's just not safe. Kids can never, ever, ever lie to their parents. Like, things happen out in the world. I know you did that episode speaking to the assistant district attorney. the episode Parents Should Never Hear, I come from a child abuse background, and I feel extremely strongly kids can't lie. And I'm never going to not be honest about something like that. They can't lie to their parents. So yes, certain things you need to be blunt about. Other things, are more of a conversation.
Right. You have a little more tact around it, but asking your child to lie to their other parent. If a parent is not seeing the problem with that, then that seems like something that should be brought, to the forefront very clearly for them.
Bad mouthing another parent also. I mean, studies show with that, the child is made up of each of the parents. So if one parent is saying, your other parent is an XYZ, some of that gets internalized to the child. Yeah. So parents need to know that.
Yeah. And they don't, it reminds me, we're going to be I had Ellen Bruno on. She did the film Split. Her new film is Split Up. Same kid several years later. And one of the scenes is a little boy, or a young man now. He's I think 19 or 20. And he says, my mom is always, saying how much she hates my dad. And this is 6 or 7 or 8 years past the breakup. And he goes, I think it means she really hates me because I look just like him. And this is a kid many years past his parents' divorce. And, mom was not saying, I hate you, but that's what that kid was hearing and how he extrapolated it in his mind. And I think that is such a telling moment. I can't wait to have Ellen on. She's going to come on and talk about the sequel, and we're going to show it. But it's just, there are certain things that people need to hear. And it's actually, you can't say it as a parent to your co-parent, right? You can, but it's not going to get heard the same way that hopefully it will be heard when it comes from a third party.
Right. There's too much anger. There's too much hurt. There's too much resentment.
Right. So your parent coordinator is actually that person who can be the voice of reason. But I have to point out, not always are parents going to agree with what you put out there. So your proffered advice, your insights, and ultimately your recommendation may not be something that a parent agrees with. And, we know they can then take your recommendation to court and ask a judge to make a decision, et cetera. But in the day-to-day of working with parents, how do you deal with that dynamic where someone's upset with you because you didn't agree with them?
So that's a great question. I mean, so I start out by saying that you won't always both agree with me, but hopefully over time we'll build some trust and some goodwill, right? So hopefully you'll get to know me and you'll feel comfortable, having a conversation with me about that, and B, understand that over the course of our, relationship, sometimes I will be agreeing with you and sometimes with your spouse. And, I had a conversation recently with somebody who said she felt that I was biased. And I said, well, I would like to have a conversation with you about it. And we did. And we had, an open and honest conversation. And at the end of it, she said, I want to thank you for your time. And I said, well, I'm glad that we had a chance to clear the air. And she said, well, yes. And I think that we're going to be stronger moving forward. So I was really grateful that she actually said something to me, right? And so I think that comes from the fact that we had built a trusting relationship over time. So if she had gone on just thinking it, then it may not have been the same. So you have to just hope that you build trust and that people feel that they can come to you. And then when they do, have an honest, non-defensive, open communication.
There's so many things that are right in what you did here and how this went. Just the fact that, you told them and you tell your clients from the beginning, there are going to be times where I'm probably not agreeing with you, and be aware of that. And also not giving permission, but normalizing the fact that if they are feeling something like you're being biased or you're not being fair or whatever that might be, to raise it so that you had the opportunity to clear the air and then be stronger going forward. That is so significant.
Well, actually, I have to give her the credit because I hadn't said, if you feel something, raise it. And I will in the future. I hadn't said that. So I give her the credit for actually saying it. And then, yes, I actually said, let's have a conversation about this, which I was glad I did. But no, I hadn't said it in the beginning, but I will going forward to say,
See?
yeah,
We live and learn. Well, and I want to just point out too, that you're also in that modeling a positive communication pattern. You're not, so that, because that's one thing that you're trying to help this couple with, these former parent or former couple, now co-parents, help their communication. It's not just working with the two of them speaking together. You just modeled a conversation with her between the two of you that was an uncomfortable conversation, perhaps aired some things that needed to be aired, and the power of that, of being able to go forward. There's also that type of modeling and lessons that, you can get out of working with someone that you has integrity and that you can trust, and build that relationship with, which is another positive of a good PC.
right. I was grateful that she brought it up and that we could have a conversation, because I want to continue to work. And there were certain misunderstandings or things that she wasn't aware of that I was speaking to her co-parent about. So she couldn't have known the whole situation. And there were things that I could have said differently to her that I had a chance to explain. So overall, it was a good experience. And I will, going forward, be very clear with people that I'm open to, feedback and communication, because this goes back to the initial point that people need to feel comfortable with me when they pick me, right? Because if their lawyers just put me in an agreement and they don't know me, then, something happens right away. They haven't had a chance to build any trust with me, or there's just not good chemistry or not, the potential to build trust. It's not going to be a positive relationship.
Right. And it's a very, you said it earlier, it's an intimate relationship, right? You are talking about intricacies of their relationship and their children. And it doesn't get more personal than that. But you also alluded to, and I think this is important for people to know, it can be a longer process, right? This can be something you may have a parent coordinator, depending on your level of conflict, your ability to, start changing those patterns of communication. A parent coordinator may be with you for a while, but the goal is to get to a point where you're, as you said, get yourself fired, right?
Maybe not fired, but get myself out of a job.
Out of a job, right? Not fired. You're right. You eliminate the need for your services. And, I know there's probably no set amount of time, or just like, how long does a mediation take? How long will my divorce take? How long will I need a parent coordinator? It depends. But how would people know they're getting to the point of, their parent coordinator being someone who's done their job and isn't needed anymore?
I think the frequency with which you need to call on them will decrease. The way you feel about your spouse, ex-spouse, will have changed. Your ability to solve your own problems. I mean, you'll know. Yeah.
Right.
And if you don't know, I'll know, and I'll bring it up. Right. I mean,
yeah. Well, and I think that's a significant factor too, because I see this with like therapists, right? You get so used to going to therapy and it's so much a part of your day that you get to go for an hour and someone's just going to listen to you vent for an hour. It's awesome. Right. And then I remember the time when a therapist was kind of like, Susan, we're kind of probably at a point where you don't need to come here all the time. And I was like, what? There's an end to this. But I think that it's important for people to know that there's a goal and that there's something that you hope to achieve by working with the PC. It's not just hiring a private judge to come in and adjudicate your disputes for the next however long. It is really, truly someone who's going to come in, hopefully help you better that co-parenting relationship and get you to that point where you don't need them.
Right. You can put a mediator in your parenting agreement, separation agreement, to say if you need mediation. That's for more like a private judge, like when you can't agree on big things. Parenting coordinator is for the little things, to keep you on track, help you learn how to parent, more efficiently and effectively. And, the goal is to, again, teach you new ways to be a family, new ways to parent, and, so that you don't need help anymore.
And you go forth in a better way into your beyond, like we always talk about on the podcast.
Thriving.
So what are some of the most common areas that people will bring? I mean, we know it's about parenting, but what are some of the real common areas that people will really need to bring in a parent coordinator to help them with?
Well, New York City has a lot of options for school choice. You don't just register at the local school. So school choice, therapy. Some parents are not in favor of therapy. Lots of vaccine considerations, lots of COVID considerations, COVID protocols, safety protocols, social media use, when kids can use social media, when parents can post their children on social media, religion, when I've had situations where parents agreed to raise a child in one religion and then a parent remarries and wants to incorporate a second religion in the child's life. Extracurricular activities. Sometimes a child plays a sport that is on the other parent's weekend and that parent doesn't want to take the child to the sporting events. The child wants to quit piano and one parent is not in favor and the other parent is in favor. We've had religious ceremony issues. One parent wants a bar bat mitzvah, the other does not. Whether or not to have a child have a baptism or communion.
So you're really getting the
New York
full
City
panoply.
Yeah, everything. Whether to ride the subway alone, at what age to ride the subway alone, new romantic relationships, when to introduce them, who, parent, whether someone is safe to be around someone else's relative, everything. I mean, I could go on and on. Would you like me to? Or?
No, well, I was just going to say, that's actually a great, because it really brings home, I think, that a parent coordinator can help you with anything really that comes up, as long as it tangentially even touches on your children. So, I mean, you already referenced earlier that the agreement can be only very specific to one issue, but if you have a parent coordinator involved, just understand that your parent coordinator has the potential to be able to help you with this breadth of issues. And many of those are not the issues that come up during the divorce, right? They're the issues that start to come up post-divorce. Or you mentioned a few that you have initially an agreement about something that you don't actually foresee changing, but then circumstances in life change and they need to be revisited. So there's a variety of benefits to having a parent coordinator that you like and trust and work with on an as needed basis. And we've talked about how it can start out sort of being a lot of time with your PC and hopefully seg you down to where you're not needing to meet with them. I just want to make sure we mention one more time, Family Kind, where you are on the board and where you also do provide parent coordination services. Tell people a little bit more about Family Kind, because it's a really wonderful organization and people should know about it.
So it was started by a friend of mine, Leslie Friedland. She was a referee in family court, and it was really upsetting to her to see so many families who weren't able to have the services they needed because they weren't able to afford them. So we're about to have our 10th anniversary. We're having a gala next month. And so what she does is provide services to families going through separation and divorce without regard to how much they can pay. So it's a sliding scale. There's some opportunity for people to have mediation services, without paying at all. And she only allows consultants who are experienced in mediation, parenting coordination. She has financial professionals, and all of her consultants agree to take the sliding scale rate and work with families. I'm a consulting attorney on a case that has a financial professional, other consulting attorneys. That's separate from Family Kind, but the mediator is through Family Kind and the financial professional. And they offer amazing parenting classes. Something I recommend to a lot of my parenting coordination couples, there's something called Good Talk for families that is a great thing for parenting coordination clients and parenting skills classes. There's anger management classes. So, one of the things we do as parenting coordinators is refer people for services. So I refer to Family Kind for services all the time. So it's really just a great organization, and a lot of professionals in New York, volunteer their time and services just because they believe that everyone should have access to, good quality services. And
it's a wonderful organization, and what they're doing, I wish every state had it. Not many do. So if you are lucky enough to be in New York, I will have a link to Family Kind in the show notes as well. And one last time, Carolyn, how can people reach out to you to find out more about your parent coordination services, your mediation services, and your consulting services? Because you also work outside of New York.
Yes. On my website, I have carolynkalos.com is for my parent coordination, but also Family Friendly Mediation is my other website for the rest of my services. Either one will get you to the same place.
Wonderful.
And I do have some social media, but again, I always say you're the master.
Well,
I aspire to be like you one day.
Well, I'll have your social media handles in there as well. And then you have a special offer for listeners to get some time with you. So if you could tell people about that and how to access it.
Yeah. So, I do work in New York as an attorney and a mediator and parenting coordinator, but I do work with people outside of New York, sort of in a strategy, coaching, consulting capacity. So there will be a special offer, and I guess Susan's going to put a link in the bio to a special price and a special offer to have a session with me.
So you can reach out to Carolyn directly through that link. It'll be in the show notes, and you'll be able to meet with her for a consultation to do some, strategizing around working with your PC, maybe get some help about working with a PC, selecting a PC. I mean, really, as you can tell, Carolyn has a wealth of knowledge in this area. So I highly encourage you to reach out to her. And go follow her on at Family Friendly Mediation on Instagram. It's a great feed. And thanks so much, Carolyn, for joining me.
Oh, Susan, it was my pleasure. You know how much I love your podcast.